Anyway, thank you all for coming. I am Tracy Marra. I am state representative here. I also represent part of Norwalk. I think I know most of you, so happy to see you guys, and this will be nice tonight. Well, I think we'll, since it's a little bit of a smaller group, I think all the education people are siphoned away somewhere else, so we'll have to have another conversation with them at another time. But it'll be nice. I think we'll get to have a little more intimate discussion. I think generally how might work best is we can kind of tell you where we are and some of the priorities that we're seeing and some of the issues that we've seen, both from discussions with the community and what we're seeing in Hartford. And then I think we'd both be happy to get some questions and feedback from you. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Yes, no, thank you. This is going to be my third and fourth year representing Darien. I love my job. It's, as I joke with Tracy, sick of hearing this, but it's the most, the biggest honor I've ever had. It's the job I've loved the most. It's the least paying job and most frustrating job I've ever had. But I do love it. I'm a trial lawyer by trade. But I absolutely love representing you up in Hartford. I've been representing the 125th District, which just started encompassing part of Darien 2 years ago. I've been doing this for 12 years. This is my year 13 and 14. I'm the deputy leader for the House Republicans. So in essence, I run the floor for the House Republicans. I'm very proud of my bipartisan reputation that has taken me 12 years to earn, and I'm proud of that. Good friends with the Speaker and the Majority Leader, the Governor, and I shouldn't say good friends with the Governor. I am good friends with the Speaker and friendly with the Majority Leader and friendly with the Governor. Because unlike DC, in Connecticut, I'm proud that we get a lot done on a bipartisan basis. Basically 85% of what we do is bipartisan. So, and the good thing about this meeting is we now have until Friday to submit our legislative proposals. Every 2 years, individual legislators can submit bills. So my list, and I'm in the doghouse with my caucus because I've got my legislative staff working on 36 bills. I normally don't propose this many, but getting up to leadership, one of the perks is that I can get hearings on a lot more of my legislative proposals than I used to be able to because of my role. But you have an amazing rep here in Tracy Marra, who represents most of Darien. I only have the small sliver. So happy to just answer questions and tell you what we're doing going forward.
Should we run through some of the things we're
Sure.
doing?
Why don't you go ahead?
So actually, why don't we, so we had the opening of session, and it was really nice to hear the governor address us and some of the issues that he has, because when he speaks to us, he's kind of setting the agenda where we know the priorities are going to lie. And of course, the first 5 minutes were on energy. So I am now ranking on energy. So how it works is you've got the majority party, they get the chair positions, and the minority party gets the ranking positions. So I am ranking for our caucus on energy, and that is already, this is, I'm sure you all realize this is just my second term, so everything is a big learning curve up there. And then energy is just another fun group to learn. So I've been in meetings all day long, listening to acronyms and trying to figure out a lot of the issues that we have and how we can make it just a little bit better. Put a little bit more transparency, try to make our grid just a little more efficient. So that's one of the things that we're really working on. We know that we have to make sure that our grid is resilient, and we have to increase the efficiency. The idea would be that we can increase supply. We have some issues here in the state of Connecticut in that we only have so much natural gas that's coming into our state. We do have nuclear energy. I have been saying this, and our caucus has supported more nuclear energy, and it sounds like that's an avenue that we're going to be looking at. So that's very exciting. The governor certainly addressed that he's interested in nuclear, and when we were having our discussions behind the scenes today, it seems like there's appetite for it in our committee as well. So That's not something that can happen overnight. That's going to be something that's decade plus in the works, but seems to be a way that we can move forward.
And while, just so you know, it's not typical for a sophomore or second-term legislator to be ranking member in the Republican caucus. Tracy, I don't mean, I tell this to anybody who asks, is a rock star. She, in energy, if you don't know, some of you may notice you're going up a little bit. It was probably the #1 issue, so we needed somebody to lead our Republican caucus and energy, and Tracy was stepped up, and I'm very excited to have her leading our caucus in the energy cycle. So
thank you.
well
I think.
done. Yes. Careful.
And so I think I'd like, if you don't mind, I want to kick it back over to you to talk about what the governor didn't necessarily discuss this too much, but we know coming back into this session, one of the biggest things we're going to be looking at is the budget every 2 years. That's one of the things we look at. And you know the history of the fiscal
Yes.
guardrails, and I think it'd be good for you to.
So, back in 2017, the Republicans got past the fiscal guardrails. That is the sole reason, those guardrails are the sole reason why our fiscal house is in order. We've had balanced budgets since 2017, and there's going to be a big push to bypass them, adjust them. And I don't know if all of you know what the guardrails are. Essentially, there's 3 guardrails. There's a spending cap, a borrowing cap, and a volatility cap. The volatility cap basically takes everything above a certain amount and pays down debt. And you know, our revenues are cyclical based on Wall Street. So we kind of average them out, and anything above that amount gets put in automatically to savings. So that volatility cap is going to be what some people are going to argue we can modify so that we can spend more money. We've got a $26 billion budget that frankly should be a lot less, in my humble opinion. We had the ARPA money that gave us a sugar high that we got used to. Well, that sugar high is gone. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on us trying to get around these fiscal guardrails, which I'm adamantly opposed to, and our caucus is adamantly opposed to. Even though we enacted these guardrails in 2017, our debt increased and didn't decrease until 2022, 2023. We've got the highest debt per capita in the country. Not second, not third, highest. That means that's a bad thing. That's the worst of all the states. So until we can get down in the middle of the pack, we shouldn't be touching our fiscal guardrails. We should be living below our means, not above them, as we did for many, many years. And it was and there's a lot of blame to go around before 2017. So I'm not focusing on the Dems or the Rs. It was a lot of blame. Governor Rell, God rest her soul. The Democrats have had control of the Senate and the House for all but 2 years, for 48 years now. But Governor Rell and Governor Rowland allowed a lot of the spending without putting money away happen. So we cannot get rid of the guardrails. The governor, I have his speech here, and I could go over notes that I have. A lot of it was good. He talked about affordability and opportunity, which we all agree with. But he talked about keeping holding costs where they are. We've got to reduce them. He did talk about bringing people back to work. How many of you realize that our state employees are in the office only 1 or 2 days a week? That's outrageous.
That's in their contract, I thought.
Yep. So the governor called for them to get back to work. I think there's unanimous support for that as well, or close to. But the fiscal guardrails are key. Happy to get in the weeds if you like. Otherwise, we'll pass it along and keep going.
I think one of the things that we don't talk about too when we talk about the fiscal guardrails, or that we don't highlight enough, is that when we pay down our debt, we then open up another revenue space. So we've already opened up about $100 million, or sorry, I mean it's a couple hundred, over a couple hundred,
yes,
really, that get to go back in the budget because you're not spending it on interest for a debt, right? That makes good sense to a lot of people, and we don't highlight that is money that we can put back in the budget. And I think we probably need to highlight that a little bit more in the future. I do want to jump into, many of you probably know that pharmacy is my background, and sometime maybe a week or two before elections, one of my colleagues in the Senate contacted me, and there was both a Republican and Democrat senator that were putting together a prescription drug task force, and they wanted to make it bicameral, so they wanted 2 people from the House to also chair this. So I have been asked to co-chair a prescription drug task force, and we just finished our 8th meeting on this, and we're looking at the cost of, not just the cost of prescription drugs, but we're digging into the reimbursements to the pharmacies. We're talking about PBMs, we're talking about supporting innovation, we're talking about drug shortages. So we've had really good, robust conversations around this. I know certainly here in Darien, we have an independent pharmacy, and independent pharmacies, or kind of any really non-big pharmacy, are struggling with reimbursements, and we're starting to see pharmacy deserts. So I know that we have high prescription drugs now, and I realize that's one of the priorities we have to have, but we also need to make sure that we are not putting our pharmacies out of business, because once we do that, and once we get monopolies in pharmacy, I think that's a whole nother can of worms, right? It's bad now, it could get worse. So I want to make sure that we keep medical access and pharmacy access to people, and I want to make sure that we're looking holistically at some of the issues with pharmacy reimbursement. A lot of it happens at the federal level, but there's a lot of transparency we can do at the state level, and I do believe that our comptroller is paying attention to what we're doing. They've joined in on the conversation. The Yukon School of Pharmacy, it is their centennial right now, so they were up at the Capitol on Monday, and they all ended up taking a picture at my desk, which was a really nice honor. But they're all very much involved in this conversation too, because it really affects the practice of pharmacy in the future as well.
I will say that one of my number 1 bills is the money follows the child. It's basically failed at every step over the last 12 years. But this time I think we're gonna get some traction on it, because I'm titling it an act to increase teacher wages in urban districts.
No, there you go.
And here's how it's gonna work, real quick. The only municipalities that get a lot of ECS money, or educational cost sharing, ECS, are the urban districts. And everybody admits we're failing our urban districts educationally. There's not a single person that thinks it's going well. So the idea being that Colby Cathedral, for example, is a Catholic school in Bridgeport, has a 100% graduation rate, 100%. It's amazing. They have roughly, let's call it 800 students. They can't afford to take any more, but it only costs about $9,000 to educate them at Colby Cathedral. Whereas Bridgeport is getting roughly $21,000 in ECS money per student. It's a lot of money they're getting. So the idea is, and the union rep came to me after I testified about this last year and said, Tom, we're interested in it, because if 1/3 of the money follows new students only to Colby, so they have 800 students, so students 801 through 1,000, they said they can take about 200 more, would get 1/3 of the money. But 2/3 of that money would stay in the district. So they'd have 200 less students, and they'd keep 2/3 of the money. So the money per child would actually increase. So I said to the union reps, I said, you can give raises, you can hire more teachers. That money can be utilized for whatever you want. And you have, because you have one less kid, and you keep 2/3 of the money. So that's the way that we can try and get it started, money follow the child, because school choice has worked everywhere it's been proposed. So anyway, that's a major one for me. I don't know if we want to go into other major housing or whatnot, but.
Well, I do want to point out that one of the top bills for the House and the Senate, and this is on the Democrat side, and you can always tell their top bill because it's the number 1 bill.
Yeah, Senate Bill 1.
Yeah, Senate Bill 1 and
or 2, whatever
House Bill
numbers.
5001. They start with the 5,000s in the House. Both of them have to do with special education, which I don't know if anybody here has seen any information on how much we got back for special education, but how special education works right now is that the towns or the Board of Eds are allowed to send out their excess costs that they spend on kids that require special education. Sometimes there are cases where kids are sent out of district because their needs can't be dealt with in district. Sometimes, and they try to make sure that their needs can be dealt with in district, but when they go out of district, sometimes those costs end up really skyrocketing. And I did get a phone call from our Board of Ed chair, and she was very calm with me, but I could hear the tension in her voice that our funding went down quite a bit. This may be a story for when we get a lot of parents in the room, because I do realize we're putting a lot of strain on our Board of Eds by having them pay for this out of their budgets, and this is a very volatile budgetary item that they're dealing with. Some years it may be really high depending on if they have to outsource. Some years it could be more within budget, but right now this is going to affect their bottom line by a very significant amount. So I'm happy to see that is Senate Bill 1 and 5001, because we clearly need to have a discussion across the state on how we're making sure that our kids with special needs are being taken care of.
6 years ago, I proposed a bill to change the burden of proof in special ed from the school district to the parent. You would have thought I proposed murdering babies post-birth, because people were so upset with me in proposing the shifting of the burden. I didn't realize, obviously, I didn't intend to upset so many special ed parents. The idea is, though, that special education costs are getting out of control. So one of the bills I'm proposing this year, I'm not proposing changing the burden of proof, because that was not well received by my constituency, but a cap. And I'm wondering what you all think. It's a small little sample, but the idea is to cap the cost to municipalities for outplacement of students to 2 times the average pupil cost. Because right now, under special ed, if the district can't properly educate a child, they have to pay what it would cost at a private school or somewhere else. And those
Or boarding school.
Or boarding
Could be
school.
boarded.
Could be in a boarding school.
Yeah.
So the idea being, look, that's not, the intent is not to have kids being paid to go to boarding school by the district. That's not, in my humble opinion, the intent of the legislation. I carry around with me the Connecticut Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, and Connecticut Constitution has a mandate that we educate every student, every child in the state. But that doesn't say that they get a private education at a boarding school at the tune of $100 and whatever $1,000. So the idea is that you cap what a municipality is exposed to out of district. And I put in there that they are capped at 2 times the average pupil cost in the district, or at 3 times the ECS funding per pupil, whichever is higher, with an idea of having some cap there. I'm flexible on it, but that's an idea. I don't know if anybody has any feelings on that one way or the other. Happy to listen.
Would school districts have a greater propensity just to send the kids to expensive institutions if their costs are going to be a lot less anyway? So what you're saying is that right now they get 4 times the cost reimbursement for the limit. It's up to
There is
4
no
times.
limit.
There's no limit. That's what that's the excess cost that they get to send back to the state.
Yeah, but you're limiting that the maximum tuition that they could agree to with the institution would be 2 times the cost of a pupil.
Would the district be obligated to pay? So in other words, right now, if the only school that can teach my child appropriately according to my experts, and then the district has to prove that I'm wrong, my experts are wrong, and it's a very hard burden. But right now, if they say, my experts say that I have to go to, my child has to go to King School, or has to go board at Taft, the district the district has to pay that. unless they fight it and win, and their chances of winning are slim, generally speaking, at this point in time. So what I'm saying is, the district's exposure is capped at 2 or 3 times, 2 times the average cost. The average cost, I think at Darien, is roughly the same as New Canaan, about 21,000. So it would be capped at 42, what the district have to pay out, or 3 times the ECS funding, which in the ECS funding in Darien averages out, I think, the same or less than New Canaan, which is about $1,000 a pupil. So that doesn't work, but in Bridgeport, 3 times the ECS funding would be $60,000. So it would be, that would be the ECS funding, that would be the cap.
So then the parents, either the parents paying the excess, or the kid isn't going to the school that everybody thinks the kid needs to go to.
Right.
If the parent can't afford to pay it. I mean, that's.
Right, it's a tough one, Amy, I hear you, but we've got to put some cap on it, and the district, and so the district can either send them to a district that has those services, or they have to provide those services within the district as best they are able under fiscal, current fiscal guidelines. So, listen, it's a very hard thing to do right now. Education, special ed costs are soaring out of control. And changing the burden of proof was not well received by my constituents, so I'm trying some other way to cap those expenses.
I think we definitely have to have the conversation, and we know there's volatility there. So I think when it comes down to it, we've got to smooth out the volatility for our towns, however we do that. Jalen?
Tom, have you looked at analytics, the difference between the capped costs to send a child out of district under your proposed bill versus standing up programs within a district to serve the needs of the kids within district? How do those costs relate, and is there still a savings under that plan, or is it just a transfer of expenditure?
So the short answer is, I have not done the analytics. I'm just trying, so the short answer is, all I've done is trying to get a hearing and a conversation started on somehow capping municipalities' costs for out-of-district education. So you're right, we need to do that. This is the first step, so this is a flawed proposed legislation, I'll be the first to admit, but we need to do that.
The conversation started. There is conversation about, and I would like to see some sort of, everybody hears the R word and they're like, oh, regionalized, but I think there is some sort of thought for bringing in regionalization when it comes to special education. And I know it's either CABE or CES or CEA that are have some proposals. The good news is there's actually a separate committee now that's a subcommittee of education that's only going to be talking about special education. And it is the chair is a Democrat representative who's a special education teacher, so that'll be really nice to have her on it. And the ranking is a very new member of the House Republicans, Tina Corpus, who's out of Greenwich. She is, I think she's going to be phenomenal, compassionate and smart. She has a financial background, but I think I talked to her the other day, and she's already dug into a lot of issues around it. Krista?
Do you have the details of what's been presented in Senate Bill 1 or 5001?
Nothing. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I'm just
they're
curious
really, everything is, all those major bills are concept bills.
Okay.
So,
That'll come out, we'll know that next week.
Okay.
yeah. Yes. Natalie?
Yes, how did you know? But isn't the issue when you have different municipalities that have a different maximum that they're spending per student? I mean, what does Bridgeport spend per student versus Darien or Norwalk or Stamford, right? This would be...
Well, it's the same, pretty much. It's how much they get reimbursed, because Bridgeport gets reimbursed to
right now it's
21, and Darien pays 21, so they're getting pretty much the same funds.
Yeah, it's
Different
roughly,
sources of money.
yeah, different
but-
sources,
Different
but
sources.
every
Even
municipality costs, I shouldn't say every, most are between 18 and 24. I mean, the cost per pupil is pretty close.
And because I'm just thinking back to, and it was 2004, so it was a while ago, when Darien had really the lowest, we paid the least amount per student versus our peer towns, but it was versus our peer towns, it
Yeah.
wasn't all of Connecticut, so I was just,
Yeah.
this is why I don't run for office, by the way, that you
No.
get to, yeah.
You're spot on. No, that's, I joke that since I've been elected for 12 years, our funding for education has basically been decreased by almost $7 million. I don't put that on my reelection campaign brochures, but as you probably know, a lot of the more affluent or communities have lost much of their educational funding, and it's been given to those that are underperforming. And frankly, I understand why.
So just looking around the room and knowing kind of some of the people that we've got here, House Bill 5002 is going to be talking about housing. I know a couple years ago, there was a housing bill that was passed in which, and actually, I don't know if neither one of us are on housing, but I will stay in tune with what's going on. But there was a bill that was passed a couple of years ago that was going to take a look at some of the fair share that each of the towns should be building to increase our housing allowance. So I'll be interested in seeing how that plays out in the committees, whether the numbers are there, and I don't know, actually there might be someone in the, do you know if they've come out with it? You might know better than I do.
Thank you for asking. They were supposed to come out with the fair share study numbers this month, and I
Okay.
have not heard a word. Tracy.
Okay, I haven't heard yet either, but okay, thank you for confirming that. So we'll look for those numbers when they come out and see how that plays as well.
So in New Canaan, we haven't had any privately built affordable housing since Avalon, and that was in the 90s. Because what's happened, and I know it's happened in Darien as well, is predatory building practices, where a builder would come in and propose 1/3 affordable with outrageous numbers, and then negotiate down those numbers with no affordable. That's happened in New Canaan. I don't know this for certain, but I believe it's happened in Darien. So I'm,
No,
No.
we have inclusionary zoning now.
Alternative,
ADUs,
well, I'll let Steve.
No, we've never negotiated that in 1 unit period in 15 years that I've been on the board.
so how many affordable units have been built by private builders?
The
Yes.
currently, well, over the last 20 years, it's over, it's 30%, so I think it's over 100.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's, yeah, because you're taking out Old Town Hall homes, and you're taking out Allen O'Neill, and that's 160 right there.
Yeah,
But
each
the
of
short
our-
answer is, any project up until 2 years ago had to have 12% affordable, and now any project has 14% affordable.
Yeah, so we're doing okay.
That's pretty good. So in New Canaan, one of the bills that I'm guaranteeing will create more affordable housing is basically a right of first refusal, so that,
That's what I was gonna ask you about that, because Greenwich already approached me about your bill, and I didn't see it in here yet.
so no, it's not in there. It's coming out, basically, the concept is if a private builder proposes a 100-unit complex, for example, and says 1/3 of that will be affordable, or 33, the town will have 120 days from the filing in which to buy it from the builder with a 5% profit, which is all negotiable, but 5% vague, so to speak. And then the town, within 8 years, has to provide 30 units of affordable housing somewhere in town within 8 years. Now, that's negotiable, but that's, so that, for example, there was
So your 30 units is 30% of 100.
correct.
Got it?
So the town then can purchase that property. Let's suppose the proposed 100-unit structure is in the middle of a 4-acre zone that just doesn't fit the proposed 100 units, right? The town can buy it and then put those 30 units somewhere else. But they have to do it within 8 years. If they don't, they pay a fine 5% to the builder of the purchase price, 5% to the state affordable housing fund, and 5% to the town's affordable housing fund for each year they don't complete the 30 units. And complete meaning having somebody living there. Now, towns don't like that because it requires them to build affordable housing. But the bill allows towns to build it where they think it's appropriate. But it requires them to build it within a period of time. Again, we've had zero in New Canaan, so I think this bill is a win-win for anybody who wants affordable housing in the state. But and I've taken the governor around and proposed it, and he liked it. He's not going to sign off on it, but I took the chair of the housing committee, I took the majority leader around New Canaan, and both of them thought it was a good idea, or at least something that they're willing to talk about.
We would just have to talk about pricing of the dirt. Fairfield, I don't know if is there any McCarthy Fahey, she chose chairman. Those guys, it's hilarious. Fairfield's got the worst housing problem out of anything. It took them 20 years to approve the site that's at Black Rock Turnpike, and you couldn't build it anyway because you have to build a hotel first. But the question is, there's a piece of land that's sold. It was purchased by a land developer, they're called. They just go horizontal and go vertical, for $500,000. Okay? It got approved, and now it's worth $1.6 million. So are we gonna pay 500, or are we gonna pay $1.6 million?
So you're going to pay.
And hold on just a second there. The other part is that properties go under contract between, these two, right? We don't know what the purchase price is. And the first guy could have owned it with no debt or at par, and the guy's gonna buy it for another number. So there's two separate numbers you're dealing with. And the numbers can get big. The numbers of land at Darien is one piece of land, 4 acres sold for $16 million.
So the town has got to make a decision. That's why the town probably doesn't want to buy a $16 million piece of dirt with a 5% rate on it. But they may buy the $500,000 piece and then put whatever units somewhere else. You're right, those are details that have to be worked out. My thought is when you sell a piece of property, it's on the title as to what the price was.
There's one that's on the market for sale right now, it's listed at $10 million.
So, but you don't know what the purchase price was?
Well, I know everything.
So what I'm saying is the town has 120 days to either accept, to take that right of first refusal, essentially what it is, plus the 5%, or not. And if they take it, they've got to build that percentage of affordable somewhere in town over the next. And look, I'm not saying it's perfect. I think 830G needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
It's just a problem. But by the way, I'm happy to tweak it and fix it, so.
I want to make sure
But then what does the town do with the land? Then it can just sell the land that it just bought?
They can sell it, they can make it into a park, they can deed restrict it, that's appropriate, that the legislative body approves. It's up to the town to decide as a legislative body. They're probably gonna need the money to build the affordable housing somewhere else, so they would sell it and, deed restrict it as a single family home going forward.
That's why, it's the deed restricting, because then you just sell it and then they do the same thing. You have to keep rebuying the same piece of property.
Right.
Want to make sure we get to any environmental issues as we look around the room at who's here. I, not on environment, but I am on energy, so I had a chance today to talk to the commissioner of DEEP and hear her thoughts moving forward. And I know one of the main things that, of course, we had a really nice discussion about making sure that we're focused on looking at what's going on with California, making sure that across the state we are, I think she said number 14th as far as wooded areas close to residential areas. So something we do need to think about with brush management, down trees management, making sure that we're not at fire risk. So it's nice to know, we had a good discussion on that, nice to know that that is something that she's thinking of. But also, it seems to be a focus on making sure that our energy is very efficient when it comes across the lines. I mean, there's funding in that doesn't necessarily come from the state, because a lot of our big transmission lines, of course, are federally done, but that is a focus of one of the things that they're looking at. Not really even just the lines, but also looking at the houses. We're looking at finding or contracting with people to come into the houses. I know I had one of these done about 10 years ago in my house, where they come in and they seal up your house and check to see how efficient it is. But that's one of the initiatives that they're going to have moving forward as well. But I don't know if you all have any issues or concerns when it comes to trees, or I don't mean to put you on the spot, but speak up if you.
I will tell you also, I've proposed legislation, 3 Ps are killing us: pesticides, processed food, and plastics. So, and even as a Republican, the Attorney General Tong put me on a panel to talk about plastics in New Haven over, I think it was in December. And the fact that plastics are found in placenta, in breast milk, in our drinking water, it's just terrible. So I am very amenable to listening to how we address the pesticide problem, the plastic problem, and the processed food problem. The fact that they can't sell certain cereals in Canada because of the ingredients is just mind-boggling to me. But in any event, I know I sound a little radical on it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. So anyway.
Well, we just, Natalie and I both attended the 25th Environmental Summit of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters. And there's a proposal to restrict the use of neonicotinoids. And that's been proposed for 3 years running and has got absolutely nowhere. So if that's something that you can support and run with, I think it would be greatly appreciated. There's also a proposal, and again 3 years running, to restrict second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. Hopefully that's going to be in bill form again, and really there's no excuse. It got to debate on the floor, and the legislators confused themselves, argued, and it died. So I don't know how to fix that problem. And
I do remember that one, by the way. That came after I believe a huge rainstorm or something, and there were actually articles in the paper about rats, and this happened all before the bill came up. It was actually the worst timing for that bill to come forward.
well, yeah, but I mean there are constructive solutions like sanitation and shoring your house up so you don't have
Yeah.
you know,
No,
entrances
I hear you.
for the vermin.
Yeah.
And then to your point on plastics, there was a bill introduced, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, also got nowhere, on extended producer responsibility.
EPRs.
That would really help with the issue of plastics, because it's one thing to say, as a consumer, curb your use, but when you go to Trader Joe, everything is wrapped in plastic. Everything comes in plastic. We as a consumer don't have a choice. We have to be presented with better choice. And yes, we could all gang together and say, we're not going to eat stuff that's wrapped in plastic, we're going to go hungry. So it has to come from the top. And the very interesting thing, we had a stand-up comedian introduce the Environmental Summit, and his name was Chuck Nice, and he said, you know, if the world is in danger, you, the advocates, are the avengers. And so we like to think we might be the avengers. So I really ask you.
It's so much nicer than the other things we're doing.
Oh, yes. We can't say them.
Well, I will tell you, have a receptive ear with me, and I will take a look at it and try and balance. I hear a lot of the noise, but I will try and see what we can do.
Well, I'd be happy to send you the briefing papers and the text of the bills that are being introduced.
Please do.
So that's helpful. But I'd love to see some movement.
Well, and particularly when you're talking about pesticides, that's something that's very hard to do on a municipal level. I mean, it would be wonderful if John could simply say, we're not going to use fertilizers or chemicals on our lawns anymore. The town isn't gonna do it. We don't want property owners doing it. It's not gonna happen. That needs to be at the state, because particularly in Darien, save the sound even, our water's toxic. And that's, throughout Connecticut. But that has to be from the state level, and that's not a Republican or a Democratic issue. The same thing for plastics, while you're talking to those school parents who are going to be thrilled, the special ed, get single-use plastic out of the schools. There's some real common sense solutions here.
Out of the Capitol building.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful start, right?
I'm surprised at how many people have their meals of,
But also on the issue of pesticides, there's the state law of preemption, so the municipalities cannot regulate private citizens.
No, it
We just
doesn't
get
yet.
rid of preemption.
New Canaan was the first municipality to get rid of single-use plastic bags, and then the state followed. We need Senator Duff testify. I'm on environment. I fail every year. I get an F by the conservation people because I'm pro AstroTurf because my daughter played. I understand, but you pick your poison literally and figuratively. But in any event, Senator Duff brought up a story about how a hawk, I think it was, ate a rodent and then got sick because of. Then they ended up calling animal control and they ended up saving the bird. But listen, I hear you, and I am going to see what I can do to get across.
That's actually a lot of rats when that was one thing at the conservation meeting that they talked about. So, I think it's important that people research and fact check these things. I know, some people are worried that we're going to, that environmentalists or conservationists are going to start climbing trees and blocking roads. This is science, and it's pretty common sense, and it's, your daughter who played sports, it's our grandparents, but, yeah.
Do we have any other questions or areas that we didn't hit on, Steve?
What about wind power? My kid goes to school in Indiana, and I go from Indianapolis and drive up to his campus, and there's big, huge wind turbines on every single farm.
Oh,
It goes on and on and on and
Yeah.
on.
Right, so
It takes about a year to put up a wind turbine.
yeah, we
And
have
the carbon
some,
footprint is outrageous.
we have some wind power here, right? And did we, and we.
We did not sign on to the
The coastal,
Mass coastal
yes,
grid.
but
grid.
we signed on to some wind in Maine.
Yes.
So it's more expensive here in Connecticut. Apparently, they're able to get it better priced in Maine. Look at when it comes to energy right now, the governor is being very careful about what kind of contracts he signs. And right now, the wind contracts that we're seeing are going to come in about 3 times more than your natural gas price. And
Actually,
everybody.
more even that. It's 3 times more than nuke, so nuke is about 5 cents, natural gas is a little less, and the wind is coming in at 15 cents or more.
Why is that? It makes no sense to me.
Well, wind is because wind
Wind is
cannot,
expensive.
it's expensive
Yeah.
to install and operate, and that is not the answer key in my humble opinion.
Really?
Not right
It's
now,
not
certainly
baseload.
not here, not for the price.
It's intermittent power,
There's
and
that.
you always need baseload. That's why you'll always need natural gas
Yeah,
plants.
there's a wind turbine
There's no
behind
way
my house in
around
Rhode
it.
Island,
Put
and
in
things
all
off.
all the wind and solar you want, you're still gonna need natural gas, nuke, that kind of thing.
And you're gonna have to also invest in batteries, for when there's no wind, you're gonna have to have something that stores that energy.
And therein lies the key, in my humble opinion. What I want to see is the solar with battery backup, because that makes sense. But just having solar with no battery backup where you sell it back to the grid makes no sense to me. So I think having the solar with battery backup so that individually we become self-sufficient is less of a draw on, but we did pass, those of us that are pro-nuclear, finally, 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, we're finally, since 3 Mile Island, I grew up outside Philly, After that happened, you haven't been able to expand nuclear in Connecticut until 3 years ago. Now we can. Millstone can increase its output. So the governor in his speech, I'm glad to hear he's working with the feds about trying to work with Millstone and coordinate with them,
Yep.
increasing the nuclear output at Millstone, which I
It's a
think is,
clean energy, not
phenomenal.
renewable, but clean. Jamie?
How about tax credits for individuals that do exactly what you just said?
That's one of my
Solar,
bills.
battery backup.
We do have credits for,
But I want them to be required to utilize have batteries, not just solar, but also you need to put in the batteries, because the batteries are the key in my humble opinion.
so solar is a class 1 renewable, so there's credit. Nuclear right now is not considered a class 1 renewable, so it doesn't get the credit, so it doesn't kind of get that special benefit. That's one of the proposals that, that we have put forward is to, well, at least, I'm not sure if it was our caucus, but I certainly signed on to, Senator Fazio and I signed on to that to make nuclear a class 1 renewable, which would then add the credit portion to it, which is a benefit. Yes?
New topic?
Yes.
Sorry. Government administration and election, I know you guys aren't on that, but for, the people of Connecticut voted in November to modify the regulations surrounding, or the reasons surrounding absentee ballots. What are your guys' thoughts? What's the caucus thoughts? What's Hartford's thoughts? Any intel?
I can tell you, I was personally in favor of no excuse absentee balloting, but I was opposed to early voting. So, and I didn't think you needed both, one or the other. The early voting has been an expense to municipalities, particularly our bigger cities, huge expense. Even the Secretary of State was opposed to the amount of time that was given on early voting. And so I'm hopeful that my colleagues, once we get the no excuse absentee voting, that they'll be willing to reduce that time period to 3 or 4 days as opposed to 2 weeks.
I have to say, I have not heard yet what's coming out of the committee, and I think so I don't know. Right now, it's just going to be a concept, but yes, I'm anxiously awaiting what they're going to have to say.
So you think a possibility would be to reduce the early voting window, and obviously anyone may now
I think
vote via absentee?
That's my hope, but I'm
That's my
not
hope.
sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will agree to that.
yes.
But because of the fiscal constraints, they may be forced to.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Peter.
Thank you.
As both a senior and a poll worker, I applaud what happened, and it really, really works very, very well. If you spent your days in the poll, or if you're an older person, the ability to drive by and leave your ballot in the box on the sidewalk, it really is wonderful. And I would say, yes, definitely take a look at how many days early voting, but certainly support both of those, absentee ballots, early voting. I mean, we're finally catching up with the rest of the United States in these 2 areas. Let's move forward.
So I agree, and I, just to add some other issues to it, the rest of the states are run by county governments, and we're run by municipal governments.
Understand that?
Right, so when we're looking at even keeping up your proper voter rolls, right? We knew over COVID, because we had the Secretary of State actually sent out the absentee ballot application, and I can't remember what amount got returned.
Oh, disaster.
It was, which meant that we don't have the proper address for people, right?
We've
So
gotta
that
build-
means our
we've gotta
voter
build
rolls.
the mechanisms, absolutely.
Right, and right now, we just don't have that. The other part is the fiscal issue, right? Because if you're a poll worker, it's a paid position, and you've got X amount of people paid every day, depending on how many days. And then looking at it from the backside, trying to get all those ballots counted from early voting on the day of. And how many more people voted because of early voting? None. We didn't
Correct.
so one of the great ideas of having early voting is that you think you're gonna make more robust voting, but that's not what we saw.
I think it'll come.
Well, that's not what we've seen nationally, but it's a convenience, and I have no problem with the convenience, but we do, when it's that much of a budget and fiscal issue on the town, that's one of the things we just have to keep in mind. Like, we like the convenience, don't get me wrong, I loved standing out there every day for 10 days.
Well, it's the burden on the municipalities,
Loved
so
it.
that's really what it is. I mean, one municipality saw both its registrars of voters choose not to run for reelection because they could not handle the burden of administering that process.
Yeah.
It's-
And
it's
everybody
tough.
always had the ability to vote absentee if
Yeah.
you weren't in town.
So it's something we have to balance. I hear you, I don't disagree, but it's just something that we have to balance.
I would also point out, why do we need drop boxes? If we've got early voting and no absentee voting, why have drop box ballot boxes unwatched? They should be either in the town clerk's office, somewhere where they're safe, because you saw the felony stuffing of ballots in Bridgeport. You know that absentee there was 21 felonies down in Stamford 10 years ago. I'm not, but there's always one or two problems with voting, and let's be smart about it. No excuse absentee voting, reduce the time period, and put the boxes somewhere where it's secure, in my humble opinion.
They're under camera now.
Yeah.
Or it's on a camera, right?
Yeah, that started this year.
Yeah.
So it's like Bathroom Hall and Eric Justin get paid to be in charge?
Yes, they did.
Why didn't I?
Yes, they did.
That was volunteer.
Could you guys talk a little bit about transportation and how that fits on the agenda? I mean, we're sitting here with an awful lot of traffic. We've got the
Yes.
slowest
Yes.
rehabilitation project on
Yes.
995, and I get a lot of frustration and emails about transportation generally. What's at the top of your agenda?
Trains that are moving slower.
Yeah, so we're both on the transportation committee, and,
I can tell you're thrilled about it.
I am so thrilled. And I want to stay on it because I think it is so important. But now, especially, when we see the congestion tax, and, my lovely press person over here gets mad at me because I'm like, we need to send something out reminding people about the congestion tax. He's like, you don't live in New York. I'm like, I know, but my people travel there all the time. This affects us every day, all day. And now, of course, what you see, because I told you this, is that our trains are so full. Like, can't even find a seat in Darien. Or you're sitting in that middle seat, which, okay, we get a little bit of luxury getting on here in Darien. Usually you get a little bit better seat, but no, and I have people regularly telling me that. And we cut down the amount of cars that we have, and we have a few less stops. So that's something that I'll be pushing for moving forward. We need more cars to get into the city. There's nothing right now we can do about how quick the trains are going. That's, federally, they are working on certainly the walk bridge. That's kind of one of the areas that they're starting with. And when they fix that area, it's going to help speed the train up. But then the next stop, my understanding is down in Greenwich. There's a curve in Greenwich that causes a problem and slows down the train there. So that'll be something, this is a series of things that they are putting some of the federal dollars in. The nice thing is we both had a meeting with Congressman Hines, and this particular meeting wasn't, it was more around the train noise, but he is focused in on transportation issues, because his issue is that he's had funds set for transportation issues and they have not been implemented. So he's getting a little upset about this too. So I'm hoping that, bringing us all together and having these conversations. We've got another one coming up on the 16th with him with that.
And Tracy, this conversation can't happen. We are putting so much housing near our train tracks. But we're not, our public transportation system doesn't exist. We're not Europe. So it's great to want to build all these homes. All we're doing is more parking, more cars. I mean, what's happened to Darien, exit 10, I apologize, I'm gonna have things thrown at me, is a nightmare, right? So we have it's a concrete jungle, we have more cars on 95, and then you have what's going on in New York, and no one's focusing on better public transportation.
Yes.
So, I don't disagree. I will tell you, we are gonna start getting faster. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but there's been a couple minutes shaved off of the train time to the city from Stamford. And it will start getting faster now, not a lot. We'll never go back to the 70s where you were flying and you know, hell be damned, we'll get there. But there are some other things looking at, like I had a meeting with the Boring Company I scheduled about 4 years ago. Anybody know Elon Musk's Boring Company? They've got now a working area underneath Vegas. It's phenomenal. It's been going gangbusters down there, and they love it. Boring Company offered to link Danbury to Waterbury to Hartford to New Haven to Bridgeport to Stamford to Manhattan with 2 proposals, okay, with the underground. They'll build it at no cost, but they own it, or we pay for it and we own it. It was roughly, doing the math, it was about a $20 billion project to do all that. My point is, I do think technology's finally getting there where we can have, it's gonna be 5, 10, 15 years out, but there will be improvements, and I think dramatic improvements. So, what my biggest concern is on the Transportation Committee is we've had record deaths on the roadways because our speeds since COVID have increased by over 10 miles per hour on average on our highways. And we passed a law under the Police Accountability Bill where people can smoke marijuana while driving, flip off a police officer, and the police officer can see all that and that's not probable cause for an arrest. Whereas if the person's drinking a beer, they can pull that person over for probable cause of driving under the influence. But specifically in the statute, you can smoke marijuana while driving and it's not probable cause of driving under the influence. It makes no sense. So we need to address that. We need to address the fact that the police, ever since the Police Accountability Bill in July of 2020, have pulled over a lot less vehicles. There's a lot less enforcement going on. So I was opposed to this conceptually years ago, but now I think I'm going to vote for it. Speed cameras. Because if we're not having police pulling people over, and the chances of death increase astronomically from just going from 70 miles an hour on average to 80. It's the window. We've got to get people driving below 70 miles an hour again. And if it takes cameras to do it, send them at 75 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour and over to get a ticket, we got to do something because our roadways are a death trap right now between the distracted driving and the driving under the influence.
Still on that same topic, I just had read an article recently. Connecticut Insider said that Connecticut is one of 11 states that allows passengers to drink. And because of that, we lose, or I should say we
don't lose.
We don't lose, but we are not able to use our federal transportation dollars as effectively as we could be. Why does Connecticut still allow alcohol or open containers and passengers with 10 other states?
Here's my argument, and I've had vehement discussions and arguments with the commissioner. We need to spend more money on education. We don't lose any federal money. The question is, what do you have to use that federal money for? And you have to use it for, if you have people being able to drink while a driver's driving, and not the driver can't drink, but passengers can, you have to spend that money, certain percentage of that money, on education. We want to spend more money on education, not less, so we're actually not losing out any money. We don't have enough engineers right now for shovel-ready jobs. That's the big problem with our DOT right now. We don't have enough engineers. We're way backlogged on shovel-ready jobs. That's something that has not gotten any publicity, but we're not ready to spend money on transportation work because we don't have the engineers. That's a fact. So my argument to the commissioner was, you get rid of the smoking while driving law, where you're allowed to smoke marijuana and drive, and then we'll address the open container law.
But the finance part is not, it doesn't really matter. It just goes into a different bucket. they
We
make
don't
it
lose
sound
any
like
money.
it's a big deal,
No,
but
I
it goes to
understand you're gonna lose
transportation.
money, but you don't have the discretion to use it in
For
a true
transportation.
transportation manner,
Yeah.
and
But we have general fund things that go over to the transportation.
Our transportation fund
It's fine.
is very healthy.
Yeah,
We're not losing out on any money.
one of our backlogs is, like you said, is an engineering issue.
okay, so if you had the money, you couldn't spend it.
Nope.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
And we need to spend more money on education and whatnot, not less.
I finish answering, oh, you asked about transportation. I just want to make sure that yes, Steve.
I just went down to Rutgers for a basketball game, and I paid $25 in tolls to go through New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
What's the, I know John hates this, what's the thing about no tolls on the interstate?
It's a tax.
Okay, so I drive through New Jersey and New York and
I look
Massachusetts
at,
and Rhode Island.
we, down here, this group doesn't mind it, but Fairfield County is not the rest of the state. And the rest of the state doesn't like it. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter, they don't like it. And we can't do tolls down here if we don't do them in the rest of the state.
Let me-
So it's just, it's absolute, even if you talk to Bob Duff, he's like, it's a non-starter, not even gonna answer the question. It just won't happen.
I did the math, okay? Math doesn't make sense. So so Massachusetts has it on the Mass Pike, that's it. Okay, those exits are 10, 15, 20 miles apart. We use 95 and the Merritt like local roads. We're on and off.
I'm
on
not
and off.
talking about parkways, because I drive on a parkway and I park in the driveway.
So 95, first of all, border tolls are illegal, so you'd have to put the stanchions up. And the cost for doing that, it would take roughly 10 years, because about 30% of the drivers on any given 20 to 30% are out-of-state drivers. Okay, the rest are in-state. So until, it takes about 10 to 12 years for that 25, 30% to pay for the infrastructure setting up the tolls. So we're not collecting penny one from out-of-staters until that happens, and the infrastructure's paid off by the out-of-state people. So I hear you want tolls. I have a bunch of my friends that yell at me all the time. You're an idiot, we need tolls. I'm just telling you, we don't drive in Connecticut. We use our roads much differently than they do in Mass, and even New Jersey doesn't have tolls on roads like, I mean, they have it on 95, they have it on the Parkway. But, you know, our state, and the infrastructure cost of putting them in is a lot more than people
We
realize.
are far outvoted on this. We
yeah,
can't, we
I
couldn't push it through if we wanted to.
And I didn't want to.
Unfortunately, and I hear you. You know, hopefully that New York congestion toll takes care of us and we can get some more trains and clear some things up.
As soon as you cross the border of Rhode Island, you get there.
Yes, I know.
Not in Rhode Island.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, I know.
I went through 2 weeks ago.
if you have a truck,
What's that?
truck, it's only trucks.
Only trucks,
Oh.
yeah. Well,
It's
there
not-
you go,
it's
send
not
it,
cars.
you know.
No.
It's semis. And by the way, that was ruled unconstitutional, they reversed, that's going to the Supreme Court. I still think it's against the Commerce Clause.
I have a question about the transportation in the Fairfield County area.
Yeah.
Are they planning to expand like 95? I was hearing this and I read this maybe a long time ago. You know how you have 3 lanes on 95, so when you hit Bridgeport and you're going all the way to Greenwich and then you go into New York, like into Westchester County, are they planning to expand to 4 or 5 lanes like the New Jersey Turnpike ever?
No, what they're doing is they're lengthening the on-ramps and off-ramps as best they can, but they are not, right now, there's no plans on widening 95. There was some looking into how on the Tappan Zee, they call it the Cuomo Bridge now, you know how they move a lane over?
Yes.
There was some looking at that as a possibility of moving the lane, so giving an extra lane, but that hasn't gone anywhere either. So the short, longer answer to your question is no. We're lengthening in the on-ramps and off-ramps, both the Merritt and 95 to try and address it, but that's it for now.
Because that's where I think that's where a little bit of the problem is, because with NJ Turnpike, it looks like you can go like in like 4, like there's like 4 lanes, I believe, on the NJ Turnpike, if I remember.
Yes.
The Garden State Parkway, I think, is 2 lanes. So just thinking about it, if they expanded 95 a little bit, I think it would decrease traffic maybe a little bit. I'm not saying you would I think what my point is, maybe someone could,
You have homes up and down 95. I can hear their constituents
The eminent
voting.
domain is a problem. And
You should
it's-
close exits.
yeah.
But
Close the exits.
they expanded it a while ago because they took out the center median district, was all grass.
So
Yeah.
I will say, I do have a bill in that, I know that we've all seen this, especially if you're on the side roads around 95, that if there's congestion on 95, everybody gets off because their Google app says to get off and go through town. So I do have a bill in that targets that issue. Asking, making sure that these mapping apps don't reroute through smaller town roads. And then in particular, that there's warnings for trucks when we have the overpasses. I mean, they're not supposed to be using those anyway, there are special apps for that, but we've hit past 8 o'clock, so I'm cognizant of your all's time, but any last questions before we go, and then we can wrap up? No, thank you all so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
coming.
Thanks, Tracy.
Our
Thanks, Tom.
contact is up
I've got
here.
10 more hours of discussion if anyone wants to stick around.
We had
My
2
third-
5-hour shot drinks, so we probably guys, I don't.
I've got 37 bills, so I can.
Our information is right up here, please feel free to contact us.
And if any, honestly, please, if you have ideas on what you want changed from a statute standpoint, please, our best ideas always come from constituents. So email, call, stay now and tell me what you think we should do about changing the law. I'd love to hear it.
Of it, that I think there is an issue.